So here we are again on Remo's podcast, episode 9th, with Chris.
I've lost count as well.
Yeah, talking about life, talking about history of Estonia, talking about history of a Brit, and we will continue where we got left off. And last time, as I remember, we were in Latvia, and the year was around 1995. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, Yes, it was 1995, and I think it's sort of important to recognise that I've not actually wished this to be my life story, although it's gradually becoming it. It's okay if that enables me to use that as a skeleton to then talk about other things, which I think we're both interested in, which it's taught me and can help us in the future. Why not? So I'm totally cool with that. And of course, if there's any questions which you can think of to ask to stimulate me, because there's actually so much that's stuck inside, and I sometimes don't know actually how to
release it.
Which one to release actually. So I try to keep quiet because I'm not sure how the audience can understand it unless it's framed correctly with a question.
So last time as far as I remember, the last topic which I was really interested in was debrief, and we went back and forth about how to do a correct debrief.
Yeah. Okay. So I will mention that. Although it will come out later, in particular with the Iraq troop, and also dealing with my new life with the new soldiers, because there was something that they were not used to, and that was being explained to them what they did right and what they did wrong and what they need to improve it. So what I found until I gained trust was that they were taking everything as an insult. So they saw we call it constructive criticism, which is identifying weaknesses, and then of course once you know what's wrong you can fix it. Unfortunately, this was my interpretation of why there was this cultural difference with regard to debriefs and explanations of what was wrong and what was right, was because, first of all, and I hope this is understandable, because even sometimes I get confused trying to understand and explain this, is that you cannot debrief something and say it's right or wrong if you've not got a laid down structure that is being taught to them, which can clearly be defined as right and wrong. And so this then reflected upon the weakness in the training structure. So I tended to be very, very unforgiving, and just using it as a platform for myself to understand how I can assist these soldiers. And then over time, as I would win their trust and I could prove what I was saying was right and correct by doing, they would then become acquiescent and malleable to be adjusted. And of course this took time. This took a lot of time. And when I worked first with the Estonian Army on loan service, one of the observations that a captain said to me, he was the 2IC of the school, he said you wasted 2 months. And I think he really meant we all wasted 2 months, because they didn't understand what was an offer And it took 2 months of, we say, softly catchy monkey, a soft approach. Because in these circumstances, which are different from my previous life, was that I cannot demand. I can only ask. And they will only learn if they wish to learn. They will only accept if they wish to accept. So that was the big difference. And I think you found this when you've gone abroad. You can't demand, because you haven't. It's not your country. They're not your soldiers. They are literally. You are a guest.
So.
So I'm getting now into the future tense of my problems with getting through the debrief barrier.
I like it
vis-a-vis in my Royal Marine military life. And the Royal military life, it is very clear. I'm the boss. You're not. You're going to listen, and they all know. And I've been tested, and proven. So I don't have to win any trust. I am. You are. That was wrong. I've now shown it to you. They now accept it straight away. And now this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it, and you're going to improve. And if you don't improve, I'm going to do it again and again and again until your eyeballs pop. So you can. I think you can see the difference there.
So yeah, it's interesting to me, this topic.
But of course, the actual structure of the debrief, really, keep it simple, keep it stupid. When you've got a structured and proven methodology that they've been taught, they can reference it when you explain what they didn't do or what they did do well, and it's recognisable. And also, as the supervisor and trainer, you are not making it up. It's not what you think per se, it's what you've been trained to do. And also you've got reference materials which you can prove, which is being learned and tested through by doing and through dying and bleeding. So it's not what I think, although of course it is what I think based on my training, knowledge and future experiences, and I can gel the two together, and we're taught to do that rather than just be a robot who just reads what's in a book, because that's an instructor who's only basically reading a book. That doesn't mean anything either.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the truth, right? It's not what I think. It's been proven.
Proven truth. It's not what I think. Of course, it's what I can also use my cognitive thinking to express why I believe it's right, and also sometimes to give some doubt to it as well.
Because sometimes the SOPs change, right?
So I can, as we say, the training materials are the skeleton. In many, especially with tactics and battle drills, you can add your own, and we were taught you can add your own personal experiences, but you don't deviate from the drill. If you think it's wrong, you can write away to the School of Infantry and explain based on what you've seen and practiced why you think it could be changed. But up until that point, this is what you're going to do, and I fully understand that now, because even I was a little bit critical of drill, because it's in the book. But what I now totally recognise is if you've not got a recognised methodology, everybody does what they want, and you can't control it, and you can't prove what's right and wrong. It's because, well, that's what I think's better, and you're only going to find out when it comes to war, and that to me is any time somebody's going to shoot at you. And you've got to actually do it. You've got to do it. And if you make a mistake, it's proven, because you've got death and destruction on your side. Hence,
I feel like if you go to war, it's kind of like you are going to listen to people like if you know 100%, like in half a year we have to go to Second World War, we have to go there, like you will kind of ask and listen to the last like drill sergeant. So but what if like it's easy to figure out what is right or wrong if it's written down and if we have drilled it down, but like in life or in leadership there could be some or like in social situations there are so many details where you can't really point out what's right or wrong. So what do you think, how could you apply those things over there? Because in some cases it's very difficult to make sure that, okay, I can give you the right feedback is because I'm right, because I actually may not be right at all.
Okay, that's a great question. That's a great question. And that's why you have to be you have to have done it to teach it. You have to have suffered it to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't necessarily have to have been to war. In fact, no, you don't need to go to war to teach it. And you can be better teaching that subject than somebody who's been to war, who hasn't got the same qualities or hasn't had the same training to teach it or understanding of it or the same cognitive ability to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the ideal solution is that you've had a gel of both experiences. And then you can consolidate it by saying, well, actually I did, when you get questioned, you can say, well, that's what I actually did when I was under fire, perhaps. Although I don't think that's also the complete qualifier. I know, and I've mentioned it before, the first time I came under proper fire was that fighting patrol. And if I had done it exactly by the book, it wouldn't have made sense.
Mm.
But using my cognitive ability and my training, I was able to then take the most from the drill and use it in that. Now, every time you come under contact, in any situation, it is unique to that circumstance and it is never duplicated. It's something similar or close to it. And that's why I always say soldiers have to be smart. It's the combination. Otherwise, people do the drill. I was taught to go left. I was taught to go right, and it's not going to fit in with the actual situation you're in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting back to your first question, or that question you just asked, because this was actually my conundrum with the Estonians. Oh, I've used the word. My conundrum with my new surroundings was that often people had some knowledge. And we have a saying about some knowledge can be very dangerous. Because it can make you think that you are totally right and you've only got half the picture, which can really lead you to take the wrong course of action.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I find that with people with limited knowledge, they think they are perfect. And we've talked about this complex before. Whereas actually, I'm taught, and I'm very self-critical. I seek criticism. You can always learn. So I would teach, and I have to admit, I would teach from an absolute basis of confidence that what I was teaching was correct, was because one, I'm using my pamphlets, and it's not just me, it's come from the School of Infantry, it's what I've been doing for so long, and I've taught it before, I've done it, and I know more than just the book. So I have the total confidence. And I can assure you, in my new life, you had to have confidence to stand in front of 100 people when you could have 100 different opinions who all think they're right.
Mm-hmm.
And it could also be, from my point of view, quite soul destroying to, after working so hard and explaining when I knew that they couldn't and would not, and I'm now put under such a spotlight to be basically perfect and now give a perfect answer to their question, which I have to admit, often they are some really good questions, but I found that they were questions just to try and catch you out or test your knowledge, and that's different. And that is what we're getting into this subject quite deeply now, and I'm touching upon, if you are in the position where you're training other countries and other soldiers, you have to be even more adaptable and that much better, because you are going to be personally tested by intelligent people asking which seem to be questions with an answer which contradicts what you've just taught, and you've got to have the verbal ability to explain what and why, that you can understand the question but why it's wrong, and you've got to be able to explain it. Otherwise, in this unique situation, you can lose their confidence. And it goes back to what I said before, you can't make them, they've got to accept it. So you get maybe, and you will understand this without mentioning, you get that begrudging blank look but acceptance of okay, and you can carry on. Also, I did something which we were taught not to do, which is you take questions at the appropriate time when you teach somebody, because otherwise if you get questions non-stop, it can disrupt the lesson and it can disturb your flow, and it can then elongate the lesson where it becomes an argument in the worst case. But of course, in my previous life, that couldn't have happened. I made the conscious decision in this environment, and I'd also say it, which was the reverse of what I would normally say. I will ask questions at the appropriate time, and bearing in mind that the question technique is always, has anybody got any questions for me first? You ask them if they got any questions about what you've just taught, and that can clear up misunderstandings. Also, and it is possible you may have missed something. That does happen. And when they say da 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 da, you go, very good point, I failed to mention that, and you can now insert it. Or, great question, we're not going to cover it in this lesson, I'm going to deal with it in the next subject, and you continue. And then of course you want to test that they've been listening and they've taken in what you've taught, so you can now ask questions. That keeps people on their toes, that they're just not going to sit there and go to sleep. I would always say, at any time you can ask me a question. And I have to admit, I had no problem with that. It didn't disrupt me, and I found it calmed the situation down, because you could have a large group of people in front of you who are getting quite angry because they all think different things, and they don't accept what you've just explained. And that's why every group I trained was like starting over again. So I'm now talking really about this unique situation that developed into the future from Boltbat. But why not? It's a great question. So it made my life very difficult. But that's what I signed up for. That was the situation, so be it. And it worked. And I did find that, and I actually, the analogy I used was like breaking a horse. Because in the early days, as I taught a new subject to them, they would fight me. They would fight me and fight me and fight me. They would try and prove me wrong. I would come back. They would begrudgingly accept. Not convinced, but I would then go on to prove. by doing, and then it would be okay. And and that was like breaking a horse. So that was my own analogy to myself of every time I would have to approach a new group, I'd have to break the horse, because it was a wild stallion who had to accept its new rider. Now, you can't run a military on those lines. I mean, as a large group, as a business, you can't do that because so much time is wasted. Unfortunately, in my situation, there was just no other option. And of course, it would lead onto a platform, hopefully fully into the future, where you have got all the books and drills and ways, and the instructors taught to the same standard, and everybody knows and accepts, and there's no argument. We just ask inquisitive questions, which are totally okay. So the horse rarely is broken in initial training, and they just accept. Yeah, we know the instructors know their shit. We know that the things that are being taught make sense. We've done it. We're now going to progress on to something else. So I accept that what he's going to teach new is also totally acceptable. And I've just come to that conclusion right now as I'm talking. But if the horse isn't broken initial training, or the horse could be broken but still a bit wild, and they're all different horses from a different location, you've still got this wildness. And I hope this makes sense.
It's interesting, yeah.
And certainly, anybody in that role where their job is to go abroad to meet and train people from completely different environments and civilizations, I think civilization is the wrong word, from different cultures. That's what you've got to do. You've got to break the horse, and you've got to be humble as well. You've got to be confident, yet humble, yet totally knowledgeable, and able to answer every question, even if it's so extreme. You've got to find a way to answer it, otherwise you can lose that, lose their confidence, lose their trust, and they don't want to know.
So yeah, I think it's a thin line of figuring out how to because what we also want to teach them, right, is humility. We want to teach them confidence, but we don't want to teach them arrogance, and we don't want to teach them that you only will give commands, because eventually you end up with the army like in the First World War, where only the command was there and people were like sheep running around. So how do you balance that kind of thing?
First of all, that's another great question. This is how I would do it. I would teach as a drill, and I would get questions, and I won't say that word often. I would get questions, and I knew that if I answered it or explained it, it would become information overload. And I'll explain. Okay, I can understand why you may think that. At a later stage, I'm gonna give you more information to understand why we are doing this now. But at the moment, all I want you to do is just do this, so you get a muscle memory and you get a basic understanding. And that would be just so you've actually learned a basic format, and I called that the skeleton. And just teaching that skeleton would take some time. And my attitude was, you don't have to understand at this moment why you're doing it. You don't have to understand. But I know that, and this is me, even really personally how I think, even more so than I've been taught, I want to make sure that everything I teach, they understand why they do it. They have to understand why you do that. Now, if I'm teaching something, I think it's not information overload, I will answer it fully. And yet again, that we're now talking now about the instructor and his own qualities of how he puts the message across, because that is a judgment call. It's a complete judgment call. And I've got to stress now, I'm talking about debriefs and training people in this unique environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's the unique environment. Let's use that term. And because I've got my vision, I've got my game plan, I've made my training program, I know what I want at the end, I know what I'm going to teach, so I can with complete confidence say, look, at this stage we're not going to go there, do this today, we'll move on to that at a later stage. But I totally disagree with people teaching things and the people you teach don't understand why they do it. Because when you know why you do it, you can then decide on the day, do I need to do that? Or can I make a slight variation to the theme? Because the words that I would use is that I was giving them tools, and the drill is the basic toolbox. Once I've shown them what's in the basic toolbox, which is easy to grasp, we have a spanner, we have a screwdriver, I can remember that. Well, later on, we're going to add on all these very small screwdrivers and different implements, and why you can use it and why you don't need to use it. But it's there for you to pick up if you need it. But if you try and teach everything in one go before they've learned the previous understanding, they won't remember it and they will never understand why they do it. And I've certainly understood that in this environment. So by the end of any subject I teach, I not only want them to understand why they do it, but I want them to understand from a leadership perspective that your job is to do this, and the person above you's job is to do this. If you also understand why the person above you does this, if he makes a mistake or forgets, or because he's not in a position to make that judgment call because you're in a position where you've seen something, you can inform the person above that information, understanding why he needs to know it, because you have an understanding of what he needs to do. So it's not only being able to do his job properly at his level and understanding why he does it, but to have a grasp and understanding above. Because as we all know in what we do, we're often separated by distance and we see different things.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to pass on information, and you have to understand why that. If you don't understand above, you may not understand what you see is important to the person above you. So I'm a great believer in everybody knows why they do it, and understanding the next level up. In fact, it's having an understanding of next level up, and some type of understanding of the level above that.
Yeah, we will also teach like two levels up.
The two up, and really it's a position of the rifleman, if pushed, could take over and become the section commander, which does happen.
It happens in Normandy.
It does happen.
Yep. So what's interesting to me, like what I've been saying to people is that I think what needs to be understood is there is a role of an instructor, and then there is a role of a team member, and I think those things will be confused many times, because I think what I've seen is that a lot of people they learn from demonstration more than from debriefs, because that's what we visualize. We want to be similar. That's the right way. And instructors can be very strict, because instructors know what they need to teach, and there is a right way and the wrong way of doing things. So now they sometimes become an example, and what the team members or leaders learn is that now I will go back, and in my squad I will be an instructor. But in reality, in team, what they need to do is they just have to demonstrate the right actions. When they do things wrong, they should take ownership of that and change their behavior and show the right way, instead of doing the instructor's job while going everywhere and telling what everyone else is doing wrong, and rather than showing what's the right way of doing things, taking ownership and moving the needle forward. And I think that's something what happens a lot of times when people leave from the courses. They go back to the unit as instructors now, but in reality they just learned the theory, they haven't started to practice it. They are not a demonstrator yet, they're not the example yet, and they kind of miss their role. And that's, I think, something what happens a lot of times as well.
Okay, yet again, this goes into this actually goes into quite a bit, actually, and there's a very good point here, very good point, because I could talk for quite a long time about this, so I keep to one very main point.
Mm-hmm.
and it's one that I've seen as an excuse in my new environment. And that is, everybody with rank is an instructor. And technically, everybody with rank has to be a supervisor. So you know the role of what you must do at your level, and you must also understand your subordinates, because if they make a mistake, you have to correct it. So you have to teach it. But saying that, if they've been trained correctly, when you correct something, it's something that they've already been taught. That's the key word. They've been taught it, and you know it, because I'm talking now from a properly structured army.
Mm-hmm.
You know that they've been taught it, because you've also been there, because that ladder of supervision also means you've also been below. See, I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
So an NCO officer has to be defined. Does he teach a subject? In other words, when you teach something, that's a new subject. When you are go back to your team, you are the supervisor of your team, and what you are doing, the clear definition is now, you are practicing what they've been taught. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So the level of ability is a lot less. And only in extreme cases, when a soldier or anybody has forgotten so much that you have to teach it. And it's going to be quite a small defined box to teach. So there's not this large smorgasbord of all these different subjects that you must know to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's within his box as their team leader. He's not going to teach troop battle drills. That's not his job. He has to understand what troop battle drills are, and he's not going to teach his squad troop battle drills. Now, what I found in it, so I think an instructor is dealing with new subjects. he's also dealing with subjects that have been taught if he's in a practice period, but he absolutely knows in clear detail that when mistakes are being made, and that's with people who've been trained, because no matter how good you are, you forget things or make mistakes, and it can be brought out by the instructor with progressive practice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a clear difference between an instructor and a supervisor at his level. Now, when I used to complain, bring it to people's attention, we need to do an instructor's course, and we have a lack of instructors, I would get told, oh, everybody's an instructor, everybody's good. And they believed it. So I couldn't also find it hard to win the argument, because there wasn't a regulated platform of instruction. Everybody's doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And also, in fairness, if you've not signed up to a certain way, so if you believe a section battle drill is you line out and charge and it's your SOP, I can't say it's wrong. It's what you teach. It's what you've got in your doctrine, in your pamphlets.
Mm-hmm. It's what you agreed.
It's what you've agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would expect, though, is everybody's charging the same way. And you couldn't even get that. And I'm talking really real time now, because when I first came here, a section battle drill was 10 men charging, a troop battle drill was 30 men charging, and a company attack was 100 men charging.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you think about it, that drill is the same for everybody at section, troop and company level. The only difference is the commander will have a bigger line to control. And in actual fact, that's the tactic that was used by the Soviets in World War II.
And in Ukraine.
Yeah. And behind them would be another, and because they expected to die, behind them would be another wave.
Mm-hmm.
And because they expected that wave to die, there'd be another wave behind them. So now that is actually a tactic that was used by the Russians or the Soviets in World War II, because they had the manpower then in the early stages without the training, and they would send mass waves against the Germans. And often, and I've read biographies by Germans, and they've said they were actually disgusted. They were disgusted that in front of them were just heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They were even disgusted with themselves about what they'd done.
Yeah.
But on many occasions, the Russians or the Soviets would break through, because the tactic was that eventually they get closer by storm and death, and this was even said, they will run out of bullets.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a tactic. Now, if you actually lay that down in a book, you can argue why I think it should change. But if that's your SOP and laid down drill, if you want me to teach it, and you brought me here to teach it, well, no, I'm not going to teach it. I'm going to go home. No,
Mm-hmm.
no. And I'm answering a question now that I've never asked myself, because when I first got asked to come here, if I'd been just asked to consolidate nonsense, there's no point in me being here. There's no point in me being here. So I'd have gone back. I'd have gone home. This is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes back to what I said earlier with saying, okay, how would you do it? And I would then say, this is how we do it. Would you like me to show you how we do it? And they go, yes, please. And then you'd win them over.
Don't you? But like, don't you
on.
think that that's even the like in like strategic terms, like that's the best way of doing it. It's like one is demanding, like, hey, you guys just have to do it, versus let me show you, let me prove you, and show you that that's the right way. Like, let's like show me how you want to do it, because eventually, like, you can like win them over in a week where they will fail their ways, and then you just show them the better way.
Okay, I think I understand the question. I think I understand it. It's a good question. Good. In those, and we're going now really to battle school and officer school days.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, as long as we can define that and people the audience understand that. Absolutely. I listened, I watched, and I made an assessment. So I did see a lot of things which I understood what they wanted to do. And in those days there was different forget the language, there was different terminologies and definitions. So for my own thought process, I would watch something and even they couldn't define it. It's something they'd copied or seen in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognised, and I'll give an example. I was shown what I would define as a anti-tank stalk. That would be where, and they had an RPG, and what you've got to do with a weapon like an RPG to take on a tank is to get close enough into a firing position without being seen, where you can hit the tank in the right place, and then hopefully you've also selected the ground correctly, where you can either be in good cover or a place where you can also withdraw. So that can be, so there's a lot of skills involved there.
Mm-hmm.
Fieldcraft, selection of ground, selection of fire positions, choosing the right place to fire at the tank. So as an instructor building the exercise, and this is going on to the instructor side now, and I learnt this on my courses and by doing. I never knew this as just an NCO. It was not my job to build exercises. I participated in exercises and could also debrief from the exercise from my point of view, but I never built the exercise. That was beyond me. It was beyond me. There's so much to it. So what I actually saw was a tractor was the target, because that's what they had available. A yellow tractor. Totally okay with that.
Yep.
And when you explain the exercise, that tractor moving about, that is the tank.
Yep.
And you can explain that this will represent this on that tank, etc., etc. So in fairness.
Yep.
So that's part of your exercise brief, to make sure that they understand the exercise and the exercise conditions, and you give them the piece of ground to select, etc. But now, when I got shown this, I saw the tractor 30 meters away from two guys knelt down pointing the RPG at the yellow tractor. and I was with he was a great guy. I'm not going to mention names, but he was as he was showing me all the things at that time. He was obviously expecting me to go, oh yeah, because they've got a so-called tank and they've got guys with RPGs, and it looked quite good. They know they're out there with RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
And also because, and this is because it's another rabbit hole. Unfortunately, I did find out. I did put this together that he'd had so many visitors, mainly special forces. Special forces. And all they did was say this is great and go home. Which goes down another rabbit hole, because that led the commander to believe that everything he was doing was absolutely correct, because these SF guys were in their own parlance jerking him off.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were playing the you're happy, I'm happy, we're happy game, and it was politically motivated that they go back and now then spill the goods to their country what they saw, and it wasn't what they told this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dead against that, because that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to come out and do something, help. Don't just give a false impression of what you've seen. That's just totally worthless. If it's politically not correct to say what you've seen, don't say anything. But that's another rabbit hole which I feel quite strongly about. So going back to the original premise, he was expecting me, I could see it in his face, he was expecting me to go, oh, that's great, yeah, okay, next place. And I said to him, they're dead. I explained that if you were to kneel in front of a tank at 30 metres in open ground, and even worse, the piece of ground they used was a brown track that contrasted against their green uniforms. I said, if you train your guys to take on a tank from this position with no cover and so close, and also the ground they've chosen is totally contrasts their uniforms so they can be clearly seen, they're dead. And I then said, and the funny thing was, I quickly looked at the ground, and I could see actually a great approach that could have been used to get into a fire position to take on the tank and to withdraw. And if the tank hadn't been taken out, or the tank had been hit, had another number, because often tanks work in pairs. The number 2 tank, if they had identified the area of the shot, if they had engaged the area, there was dead ground that the 2-man crew could have got into and been safer to extract. And these are the things I started to mention. And I said, then, you're going to be teaching the guys that if they can choose the right ground and get into the right position, they can safely, you can take on the tank with the best chance of success and the ability to fight another day. But that is suicide. You're just teaching them to die. To his credit, he nodded and he understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get angry or get arrogant. I just explained and showed him why, and he just nodded, gritted his teeth, because every time he took me to a new place, I unfortunately had to make the same type of observations. But I said that with no malice, with no arrogance, and over some weeks, as I was building trust and a relationship, I then realised it wasn't enough just to explain what was wrong. I had to do something which was right for him to see. And because I'd now built his trust, he gave me the resources to do something for him. And I think that's why I was told that's why they wasted the first 2 months.
Mm.
In fairness, it was just the way it was going to be. There's no way around that. And in fact, from that 2 months getting to know each other, it proved a lasting relationship that is there to this day. So it certainly wasn't wasted. But I get the point at the time.
So what I got from this is that you have to show them that you care, right? Really.
Yeah,
It's not about
great point.
That's the main thing.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I'm going to explain. Yeah, I cared. I cared. I took it personal. I really took it personal. And I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for them. And what I often saw, unfortunately, was that people who came here, they were doing it for themselves. They were doing it for their country. And that's a great point. It's something I normally wouldn't say. I'm not about me, but yeah, and I've always been the same way. It's not about me. It's about them. And it has to be personal, because you have to invest in these difficult circumstances every fibre of your body. Otherwise, you will just give up, or just I'm not going to put myself through this. You think of yourself. That's why, yeah, and because
I think that's the difference. You've got
to take it, and I think actually any good instructor in any environment, though, to different degrees, you have to take it personal. It's not just a job. It's personal. You want these people to progress. You're happy with them doing well. If they can't do something, you take it personally as a hurt. You actually hurt. You hurt when they can't do something. You want to improve it. And if you make a mistake, it's another thing. If you make a mistake, you hurt. If you fail, you hurt. And then that's a self-device which makes you improve and makes you continue. If you don't care, you just turn up, go along with the flow, and it's 5 o'clock. I'm going home. And that sort of attitude can be in any environment.
Absolutely.
So I think in any environment, if the worker cares, he's a better worker with better results.
Absolutely, and I think you can get somebody to care when you show that you care. Because why should you care about me if I don't care about you?
That's another great point. And I've got to try and answer that. Yeah, it's a great point. Within the British military, there's called something the Armed Forces Covenant. I think I'm right in that description. And I think it may even be written, but regardless, I always felt that regardless of the circumstances, although it is not a warm, fluffy club, that no matter what the circumstances are, that while the individual may be put under a task which can actually kill him, even that is for the greater good of the corporate body. And that fighting patrol is a prime example. And I did find out, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I do know that the troop commander did say to me sometime later that the CO actually was prepared to lose the whole troop. And to this day I accept that. I accept that because with what we did and with the information gained, it allowed the battalion to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real time. But what do you mean they're looking after you? You died. Well, yeah, because he's looking after the battalion.
Yep.
If he looked after me, and we failed, and battalion do the attack, and 600 men die, well, you know, so I can live with it if the commander does it for the right intention, for the greater good of the corporate body, not because he's a bloody idiot who just says charge and he doesn't understand or care about you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the balance.
That's the risk is always involved. I always say, I ask there's a dichotomy of leadership in terms of there are many aspects, what's more important, mission or people, right? And now if I only mission number one all the time, I eventually have 0 people. And now I ask, okay, if we want to take care of only our people, eventually we will send no one to war because it's dangerous, but that's not an option.
Yeah.
How can we lose 0 people how can we make sure that we don't need to fire anyone? We don't start the business.
It's funny you mention that, because one of the questions I would get, no matter how well I explained things and did things, I'd say, well, they'd say to me in the questions, well, somebody can die. And I would explain, yeah, they can. Even if it's the best plan in the world, the best piece of ground, you've made the best decisions. I said, oh yeah, because it's war.
Yeah, enemy has a say.
And that's why you get good luck and bad luck. But I also said this, that training gives you good luck from the Greek gods. The Greek gods will give bad luck to people who don't train, or they've got a better chance. You've got a better chance of being struck with the bad luck lightning from the Greek gods if you don't care and you don't train. If you train well, the Greek gods are thinking, yeah, I think they deserve a bit of luck. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we will take it to Valhalla.
That's how I sort of look at it, you know.
I used to say that enemy was not part of the briefing, so they don't know our plan. So they have their own plan. So we can't.
Yeah. Well,
if they were here, they could not shoot at us because that's what we expect them in our planning. But they were not here.
So that's why on that fighting patrol, we should have been massacred, but we were not, because the sentry didn't do his job. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So getting back to that. Okay, caring. So what was the question again about caring? Yeah.
So yeah, it was if you want someone to care about you, you have to give it first.
Oh yeah, the covenant. Now, the covenant within the British military is that, okay, so if you die, your wife will get. If you're married, your wife will get a pension. If you get ill, you'll be looked after. We will change you around the country and maybe different parts of the world. We will make sure that your children get education. We will give you a house to live in if you've got a family. Those sort of details. So I can expect, and certainly I expect, some bad times in the military. Places I don't want to be, but you accept it because it's what you joined up for, and you also understand because there's good and bad in everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that you're going to be looked after, and it's not just bad man management. And if it's a bad situation, like I lived in a hut on my own, with the troop for a year in the Falkland Islands. I mean, the hut was in pieces. There was nothing. But we made it what it is, and you just accepted it. It's what other people had done. It's just because military life also has ups and downs. I accept it. When you don't get looked after, and you get abused as people, well, from a man management point of view, you can have a terrible workforce. Now, going back to my unique position, I had a small group who totally supported me. but only on a personal basis. And I had all that Soviet element, who I don't deny their absolute integrity and courage and resilience, wish, honour, devotion to their own country. I have no question about their honour to their country and about their wishes for their Estonian army, but because of that old mindset, that was the, and this is my own personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be. But they were against me and everything I was trying to do. So for all my personal endeavours and wanting to help, I received little or no reward, and in fact I also received a lot of lies and criticisms, bordering on hatred by some people, belittling me behind my back,
Mm-hmm.
whilst taking what I did as what they did. That was unique to my situation, but I'm sure I'm not the only person who's had to suffer that. And I think a lot of us in our own way have. We all have, because everybody's been in their bubble, and if you're not part of that bubble, everybody else is the enemy. Am I making sense so far?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the main thing here in general terms is that I like there is a saying by the Neil deGrasse Tyson. He says the challenge of life is to know enough to think you're right, but not enough to know you're wrong. And I think that's most of the time the case, where you have military experience, you have some knowledge, you think that you're right? And now you are arrogant, you're not open-minded enough, because that's what the military doctrine of Soviet Union was. Don't think, listen to what you were said, and if you were thinking, you were definitely let know that you shouldn't be thinking. Now, they have now gotten free, and eventually they know kind of some way how to fight things. So they think that's the right thing now, and it can't stuck in their head that someone knows better, that someone's army is more successful, someone has better SOPs, someone is more knowledgeable, and to their ego it's something which they can't just take, because they just listen too much of their own ego. They couldn't get out from that, and the only way they eventually get through it is through humbling training and actually being proven wrong on a battlefield, that the things that they thought that they know really don't work. And eventually, if they had to go to war later on in Iraq and everywhere else, then eventually they didn't have any options, because now it was serious. They actually had to go to war. And now if you go through training, like if you don't have that end state of going to war, you can bullshit and you can think that your jumping things could be whatever. But
in peacetime,
yeah,
they can hide, they can play that bullshit game. Also because, and I mentioned it at the lower level, but it also happened at a bigger level. You get massive you'd get generals coming here saying,
it's even worse. The higher level.
You guys are great. And they just turned up. What have you seen? Which further exacerbated the situation. And yeah, again, I know that I was never doing it for me. I know I was always humble, and I made sure that my name wasn't attached to it. But it was still impossible to win some people over.
Absolutely.
Impossible.
And I think you shouldn't like even try. There's
No,
no point.
well, I think in the end I realised that, so I knew what I was doing was right until you can prove me that I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Up until that point, I had a great faith in what I call the men, so I'm not going to stop. But in those early years, we're talking the first 3 or 4 or 5.
Mhm.
It was emotional beyond description.
For you?
Fortunately, I this was I wasn't new to this.
Mhm.
If I'd known what it now, I've got to qualify this with something.
Mhm.
The reason why it became this way was because the general who asked me to come was deposed.
Deposed means what?
Deposed. Removed. Taken over.
Okay.
You know, like the king was deposed
Yeah.
by, you know,
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Overthrown.
Yeah, again, if I talk about this, it's going down another massive rabbit hole. I think I can say this and talk about it in more detail later, perhaps. And I'm going to mention the name General Kurt.
Mhm.
Now, General Kurt asked me to come here because, and this is quite funny actually, over the years, because obviously there's so many people who know me and so many people who've heard of me and so many people who don't know me or heard of me, and they say, and of course I'm this Brit guy in Estonian uniform, and I do get it. What is he doing here? To the people I've not met and trained with, I understand that. I totally understand that. I can put myself in their shoes. I can. And it is unique, it is weird, but it's not because I chose, it's because I was asked and because I felt personally involved because of my time with Boltbat and at the battle school in British uniform. I now have this personal attachment where I was prepared to suffer.
Mhm.
I think old soldiers are to somebody. Got to be prepared. I was prepared to suffer for what I
Sacrifice.
knew would be a tremendously hard task to influence an army, because that's what it was. I knew that.
Absolutely.
So, fortunately, I was 41 then, and I'd been in the military 24 years, and I'd been on Boltbat and other places. So, and other things had, let's say, psychologically prepared me for so much shit. Because physical pain, I think, is quite easy to deal with. Emotional pain is a lot harder.
Mhm.
And I certainly went through a lot of emotional pain in those early years because of everything I was trying to do. I got such tremendous pushback, and I certainly got no reward.
Mhm.
But the good thing is, when you don't want anything, it puts you in a. When you don't want anything, and you've got nothing to lose. Although I suppose I did have a lot to lose, because I'd broken clean from UK and everything I gave up. But within the army framework, I had nothing to lose. There's nothing I wanted except to help, and that put me in a powerful position because you had nothing to take away from me.
Yeah, you have in the civilian world, you have fuck you money.
Yeah, I did. I did have fuck you money, and because I also had I was building up a grassroots support, and also this is the irony. They knew what I was doing deep down was correct, and they knew they were getting good feedback and kudos from it.
Mhm.
And I know that. Now, I don't mind admitting I'm human, and I've said before that from an instructor's point of view, that my aim is that every Friday after hard work, if possible, I want to frame the week where they do good on the Friday to prove what they've been taught is now successful, or they come to a certain stage in that training where they can go, oh, I've improved. I did something today. I did a section attack and we made the right decisions and we overcame the enemy and it would have worked, you know. And often on Friday when they all cleared it was a happy feeling. They'd worked hard. There was a dopamine rush from the training team and the guys, and I always strived for that. Not always possible, and I have to admit that was my reward. I got a lot. That was my reward, and one nice comment from the youngest guy, soldier, could make up for all that shit that I knew was coming from this level. So I learned not to care about them. I hate saying that, because they were, I ignored it, and I had to ignore it because I think in the end, if I'd taken it personally or to heart, it could have destroyed me a little bit, and it did to a certain degree in the first years. I have to admit, it hurt me deeply. Actually, hurt me deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. You were doing a same job what like a whole unit of, I don't know, SF should do.
I was.
Like
and
you
more,
were doing the MA operation, right?
And more.
Because you're doing for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Obviously more. Yeah.
So, but it's
like
for you to say that, not me.
Guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, and I did even get a thank you from the, gotta be careful, I'll say this again. I would have expected, because you see, everything I did also helped NATO and the British. Even more so now. And I never ever got a nod, we say, from the British. In some ways that's not a bad thing, because I also made sure that when I came out, that I'm now in Estonian uniform. I'm not working for the British. I don't talk to the British, but you would have thought, because I also know that anything good that I did, they also got some reflected glory. And it would have been nice if they'd say, hey, well done, Chris. We know what you're doing. Great. It would have been nice. But as I learned, as I would say in saying now, I was old enough and ugly enough to take this shit, and it's okay.
I think what I've learned in terms of that and how I describe it is, to me, like the intent, or how can you understand that you were a really, really, really good, advisor or SF unit that went into a country and helped them to achieve their goals, and you were actually asking the right questions, pulling the right things, providing them the right training, but in the end they feel that they made it. They were the ones who actually made it happen, and they don't contribute zero praises to you, and to me, if that's the perfect job done by instructor. You have teach them in a way where they think that they did it.
Yeah, and I think in many ways they did, with the help.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I've got to tell a real story now. I'm going to say it. So when I had my leaving day, when I left the army, and I was 64, and as you say, it was even I have to think about it, 47 years, 24 plus 23, and actually 27 years with the Estonians. The most important thing is, for me, the young guys came to see me. And one of those young guys, you know very well, I know you respect, and he's in a very senior position now. He told the Chod and his chief of staff that I was leaving. Wink, wink, nod, nod. You know, this is where and when, and I'm going. And they didn't come. But what's important for me is all the young guys who are now a bit older as well and have a lot more rank, and some who haven't, were there and showed their support and friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the Chod not coming as a compliment, as weird as that may sound.
Mm.
And I also said many years ago to myself, as a way to gauge myself, because as I said, I am very critical of myself, and I would say, and I'm getting older, will they view me as too old to teach? Because that's always, I get that, I understand that. And I would say to the guys, do you think as I stand in front of you, do you think I'm too old? Would you? They go, no, Chris, there's no problem whatsoever. And I go, okay. And I said that if a young soldier said to me and could prove it by making a comment based on, which I recognise, and he said, Chris, you're too old to be doing this, and now you're teaching things which are now out of date. Bearing in mind, I always looked at the relevant pamphlets from today when I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I would leave the army in 10 minutes. If a young guy said, Chris, I go, yeah, he's right, I would leave. But if some senior officer who doesn't really know me and has got this chip on his shoulder, if he wants to bitch about me behind my back, I don't care. So the only person who could dismiss me was the young soldier, believe it or not.
Mm.
And that was also my shield. But I also understood that in my unique position, and it's also relevant, I think, to lots of things we do, it's not the beginning, the middle, it's the end that matters. And now I've achieved my aim. I couldn't do any more with what I had. I couldn't do any more. I know that. I know that. I survived it. I'm happy. I'm fit. I'm strong. Yeah, it's good. I'm glad I did it. Got no regrets.
Absolutely.
No regrets.
And that's awesome. That's awesome to see. And I think when what actually is, to me, the biggest thing in and I think what I like to point out always again is there is this saying that intent has a smell, right? Because if people has a bad intention, you can somehow smell it, right? And now if a person has a good intent, you can also smell it. Yeah. And that's the same thing with care. If someone genuinely cares, care doesn't mean that I will not hold you up to standard, that I will let you slack. That's what care means. Caring means that I actually keep you on the standard. I will do it because then you will be able to survive. And then why is that the intent has a smell? Because the words are kind of only 7%, 93% of our communication is non-verbal, right? It's your body language, it's your tone of voice. The words don't mean nothing. You can see from some of the officers, some of the people, they may be saying the right words, but they are not great actors. So you can see them through all the time, whatever they are. And now, I think the best advice would be for people, just give time And if you have the right intentions, you have the right things in mind, everyone sees it. There is no doubt. Just have to give time. Just do it. Do the right things for the right reasons long enough. And you don't have to explain what your intentions are. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, because people who have bad intentions, it will come out and everyone knows that you're an asshole. If you're a good person, everyone fucking knows.
Yeah.
If you're a good leader, everyone knows. You don't have to say it out loud. Hey, I'm a great leader.
Yeah, that's yeah.
No, you don't have to say it.
If
Nobody even.
There's a lot of things. If you have
good.
to say it, it means that, you know.
Exactly, and the same with being a good friend. Yeah, you don't have to say that. Hey, I'm a great friend. No, everyone knows. So that's the truth about all of those things. Like, if you believe in the right things, if you believe you're doing the right stuff, if you're moving forward, if you're learning, you're moving, then there is no way that it will come out unless you had bad intention. Then it will come out. So you don't have to worry about it, because people know, people see, people feel. And if you give it enough time, then actually you will win. And the people who were complaining, while they were complaining somewhere in the back rooms, eventually I was working while you were complaining, and eventually I'm winning and they are losing. So that's all I need to have in me, because eventually, like, people will see. I don't have to say anything, and it will be shown by the proof. And I think you're a perfect example of that. It's just that you had to fight an uphill battle, ass first up the hill. That's what our guys say, because that's how Estonian SOF was founded as well. There were 4 intelligent guys who kind of wanted to sell the idea that Estonia needs SOF. Then they went to the commander of intelligence battalion, I think, and said, hey, NATO should have a SOF unit. And then he said, oh, that's a great idea. And then he went to a general at that time. The general at that time said, obviously, no, we don't need this shit. Then these guys will, oh, it didn't happen. All right, then. So who is then giving commands or orders to our general? Oh, it's the minister. So who is giving advice to a minister? The advisors or the chancellors or whoever. So where do those dudes go? Oh, they go to the bar. All right, let's figure out where the bar is. They went to the bar, and then they saw the dude who is the advisor of the minister. Then they went to the dude, hey, oh, you are working for the minister. That's awesome. They were building relationships, asking questions, and saying that, hey, do you know that NATO should have SF unit, because less people, less money, more blah blah blah. I don't know, whatever they said, whatever they whispered. And this dude said, oh, that's a really great idea. He went to the minister and said to the minister, hey, I have an idea. We should have this NATO. In NATO, every country has a SOF. He says to the minister said, oh, that's an interesting idea, I like it. Minister goes to the general, hey, I have an idea. We should have now a SOF because NATO has an thing. And obviously general thinks that, all right, that's a good command or whatever. He goes to the intelligence battalion. He says, hi, I have an idea now. We should do a SF unit. And eventually the battalion commander of that intelligence unit says that we should do that now. But eventually you can do a lot of things for right reason. If you don't give up, you will be able to do it. But it will be you're climbing a tree ass first. That's how they describe this way of leading up the chain of command.
The only, if I was to analyse it from a completely business point of view, and I'd go back to the point I made about General Kurt. Now, General Kurt actually had been a captain in the reserve Soviet army, which was completely normal because he'd been at university, and that was, you could argue, was the minimal sort of influence that you could have got within those circumstances. And we also know he was a freedom fighter during that time, and a leader. And the other good thing about him was he was still quite young. And in fact, I didn't really realise this until he died, that he was about 18 months younger than me. Now, one of the types of leadership, and when they break it down, one of the parts of one type of leadership is that, I think it's called individual leadership, when there's nobody else except you. And one of those parts of leadership is to have a vision of what you want. Now, I talked about the Soviet guys, and this is why it's not a personal criticism, and I understand it. Their vision was based on the vision of their Soviet experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of get it, you know. The biggest mistake that was ever made was deposing General Kurt at that young time in the establishment of the army, because through Boltbat, which in its essence was British infantry training, which he came to see, and he also talked to all his soldiers and wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet again, that is breaking the mould from what I've mentioned and written about in those articles about people not going to look at training and seeking feedback. Because General Kurt saw, not just once but many times when he visited, what we were doing. It gave him a new vision. It gave him this new vision. And he knew that he wanted this for the army. And as I get back to the Baltic subject, the Baltic Battalion subject, probably at a later date now, one of the things, and certainly at my level, I didn't think about this. Although I had an idea that we're not just doing this for this small group of men. We're doing this to influence the army.
Mm-hmm.
But don't tell the people across the border that, because that was those early sensitive days.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that as well. But that was the intention. I know it was. And General Kurt saw it and wanted it for the army. That's why he asked me to go to the battle school, and he got it. To be quite honest, that was absolutely visionary.
Mm.
And at the end, and near what could have been the end of my service, he asked me to come back and change uniforms. Now, if he'd stayed in position for his next 4 years, and he might have got another 4 years, that would have given me, because I had his total support and power behind me, and I could have put in place what I did for, let's just use one example, what I did for the Iraq troop, I could have done for the entire Estonian army in a systematic way. I could have built that. Write the program, train the trainer, establish the system, establish this circular effect, so that as people go, people get retrained and people fill slots from other places. And that was actually my vision. Mm-hmm. My vision to myself when I came back out here was, I'm going to make sure that the conscripts get a correct training, because if the conscript cycle is done correctly, it means it forces the NCOs to be trained to lead at their level, and also some of them to teach at that level. It forces the officers as well.
Mm-hmm.
it's a complete knock-on effect, because you can't have one without the other. And I knew it was totally possible, because in a micronism we did it with Boltbat, and I which I didn't fully understand then, but certainly learnt later. Estonians learn so quickly. It would have been even easier. Well, I think easy is the wrong word. It would have been more achievable than what I anticipated. Definitely possible. Bearing in mind, there's another comment I can make about this unique situation with me.
Mm-hmm.
I never at any time said to myself, this is not possible. I just said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to find a solution, no matter what. Because one of my feedbacks from Britain, actually, when I said what I've been doing in British uniform, they said you can't do that, because their problem was that they were in a system that had been developed over hundreds of years,
Mm-hmm.
and they therefore expected it would take this long to do so much. Could I do it, or could we do it to the same standard? Not initially, but certainly once you've built up a methodology and some sort of standard, it's quite easy to build upon it until eventually you get the same standard, if not more.
I think that the stars were aligned in a way where, you got the right person at the right time, and then the country had to go to war, and then you kind of the frontline troopers, they had to start learning, because they could only rely on one person who has actually been in war before, and nobody else had no idea about anything. And as the first troops started to come back, they actually understand that there will be shooting, there will be people getting killed. So they had zero. They learned, they got proof through the circumstance.
I think, first of all, if I'd not been to war, I could have still done the same thing.
Sure, but maybe they wouldn't there's I think that
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah,
the point
yeah.
you want to make. I do understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I do understand that, and it would have made my life a little bit more difficult. I agree. In this circumstance, I agree.
Just a credibility factor, but I agree
slightly,
with.
I agree. I agree with that. I agree. It would have made it a little bit harder,
Mm-hmm.
but I've got to say, I would have still done the same job.
Yeah, I can guarantee.
Because that's the training system that I've been brought up in, and because we are trained for war.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to war, at no time did I think, what am I going to do, or am I worried? No, I totally, yes, go. I know what I'm doing. But I do get your point. But if you'd had somebody who'd just been in a war zone and done some stupid shit, he couldn't have.
Yep.
Because you see, I make that point because people who'd come back from Afghanistan, what they were doing was, and this could be a logistics guy or anybody, or even a great guy, and suddenly they're saying, he's been to Iraq, he's been to Afghanistan, he can now train everybody. Well, that's ridiculous. So that's why I make that point. Just because you've been to Iraq doesn't make you a trainer and somebody who knows all the skills and drills. No.
I 100% agree,
No,
because
it doesn't,
Soviets
no.
been in war as well.
Yeah, otherwise,
But they still don't know shit.
Otherwise, you've got the entire British Army of tens of thousands. You're telling me I could just grab any of those and they can go, no, of course not.
Mm-hmm.
All I would say is it's a nice little X factor. It
I
is.
agree.
It's nice. A little X factor.
It's a
It is
cherry on
nice.
top.
It is nice. It is the cherry on top. And the irony is that I think, and I got to admit, this could be bit of a Sigmund Freud self-analysis. that without even knowing it, the reason why I was drawn also to helping the conscripts was because of what happened in the Falklands War. I think there is something there because we did things to them which we possibly couldn't have done more so, and I wanted to it's only part of the equation of rectifying not a wrong but a part of something that happened in my life.
Yeah.
And that's why in many ways the stars that aligned for me, or I call it the domino effect. All the dominoes in my life had lined up, so as they tripped, I was able to be here.
Mm.
Because all my friends said, "You've got to be crazy going back out there doing that." Yeah.
And that's the truth.
So the Iraq. Let's go to the Iraq troop.
Mm-hmm.
The Iraq troop was a big wake-up call.
So what was that year?
I think
No.
about 202, 203.
202. Mm-hmm.
202, yeah. Or the end of 201, 202. This is why I said before, deep down they knew. Now before, the guys we train for missions, it was the lower intensity. So fortunately they never got into firefights, and there was very few if no deaths. And that doesn't decry and means that they were bad soldiers. We actually trained them to be fighting soldiers, and also good fighting soldiers don't panic and do stupid shit and kill civilians because they misinterpret the situation or threat, so they overreact. So a good peacekeeper is a good aggressive soldier who knows how to press his buttons and not panic. But now, when people volunteered for the peacekeeping missions, they would say to me things like, "Oh yeah, when I come back, I'm going to buy a car." So their mindset was, it's just, I'm going to go away and save some money.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually turned that into a black joke, but a complete, certainly Raw Marine type attitude joke, and a joke you're going to understand. Because at the end of the Iraq troop, and the guys are going to be going, I would say, "Okay, guys, who's going to buy a car when you come back?" And they'd start to tell me what car they're going to buy, and I would then say, "Can you get it in automatic?" And they'd look, quizzically. "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, what happens if you come back with no legs?" And they'd laugh, which is what I wanted. Because you've got, and obviously it's preparing them for the fact that you could lose your legs. So I'd say, "Can you get it in automatic?" "Why?" "Well, what happens if you lose your legs?" And the guy who asked the question, the guy who told me the car would look a bit stony faced, and the rest of the guys would really laugh.
Yeah, that's
and
a good one.
And the other thing was, they'd say to me, "Oh, when I come back," and I'd say to them, "Who said you're coming back?" and I meant it, but not in a bad way. To make them think.
I get it. I totally get it. It's a good thing.
You gotta start putting yourself in this frame of mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every day, survive and fight to survive. And at the end, when you come back, you're back. Up until that point, put it out of your mind. So there's a completely different mindset from everybody. If I use the Iraq troop is the best example of this, because in those early days it was some, and they're all getting attached to the Americans in Baghdad, and they were involved in some real stuff, and the hierarchy now realise that if people come back in body bags, ain't gonna look good. I'll be honest, I think a lot of it was that was it. Not about the individual dying. It won't look good. Won't be good for their resume.
Yeah.
So I got asked to go to Paldiski.
So that was before the first
troop. The first troop that went, they actually went virtually immediately, and it was, I won't mention names, but it was a captain who we well know, and most of the guys in the troop were former brought-back soldiers. And because some of those guys became I trained them to be my team. They would say to me things like, "Oh yeah, we started to do that." Now, fortunately, because they had a good basic training, they could adapt to the environment. It gave them enough get out of jail time to survive, to establish, and basically it's something that I abhor, but because they had a good basis of training, they could learn on the ground, and that's a terrible thing to have to do, and they got away with it, and they all came back.
Yeah,
but it is not recommended. So I got asked to go to Paldiski, and it was pretty ad hoc. And yet again, the first troop, the problem I had was that the 2IC. I'm digressing too much on this. I got and time is why as well. I'm not going to go into that just yet.
Okay.
The main point is this: the hierarchy have admitted, and they know deep down, that their guys aren't trained enough to deal with this. And it was something that I didn't come back to Estonia for, just to be involved in training the platoon. To cut a long story short, I became heavily invested in it and created a team to train them, which goes back to this: I cared.
Yep.
And I didn't want people to die just because they're not being trained. Now, were people going to die? Possibly. Yeah. But I know they've got a better chance of survival by training them. So that's how I got involved in the Iraq troop, and it evolved into 5 years' work. And at the end, I had a complete sausage machine, where they turned up. No matter who they were, I turned them into, with also the Estonian team with me, into a first-class platoon, who were looked on by the Americans as a special forces platoon. That's their words, not mine.
Yeah.
Who they expected at first to be some Eastern European camp guard type stuff. I at the back of it, I was always, because you see, Estonia got so much credit for that, which I got no problem with. I'm not doing it for me. I love to see it. It's great. But my problem was, an American general would come and say, "You guys in Iraq are so great," and then these guys who gave me no support and were shitting on me said they did it. Now, I don't mind them saying they did it if they'd given me support, but they're giving me support to make it bigger, which makes you even not only it's about better, but better for the country's defence. So that I can never square that away in my mind.
Yeah.
But and I had to ignore it because it would. And I would just hope eventually I will break through this barrier. Now, one of the platoon commanders is now the Chod. And I think that's the way we've broken through the barrier.
Absolutely. I think that's what it takes time.
And I always felt that it was the long game. So ignore this nonsense and just keep climbing the cliff. Just keep. No matter what happened, just keep going.
Yep.
And eventually you get to the top. Hopefully we're near the top, but that's for now for others to decide and continue. But I think the Iraq troop actually did a lot for the EDF, because in many ways what we're also doing was being the battle school, because so many people that we trained in the Iraq troop became the NCOs who were then in the Afghanistan company. Now, NCOs were looked down upon by the officers. Only a section commander. And I know that pervaded. I think only more recently the British Army's got out of this. So I'm not going to criticise it. It's an observation. But when the Iraq company, the Afghanistan company, the troop commanders, the company commanders, and ironically, a lot of the company commanders were actually in the Iraq troop. They knew that if they did not have good section commanders, that they were going to have massive problems. And they also knew that just getting NCOs from the system wouldn't cut the mustard. Absolutely. So that also proved that they knew as well that the system wasn't working for them.
Well, I think that the people who start to understand it, who actually go and get deployed.
Yeah.
Then they start to understand now what's the shit.
And it's something that I'm hopefully going to, because the things I'll talk about now today, I hopefully as I put it into more modules, I can go into more detail. But is that one of my regrets? Wrong word. I'm going to say it, one of the possible mistakes of the Baltic Battalion project was that it should have been the Baltic Brigade project. Because if we'd made it brigade, it would have meant that we'd have started to have at least a one-star general within the system. It'd have had all the brigade headquarters staff, which are senior and staff officers, and then with the Baltic Battalion Brigade, they would have been able to be deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and that would have meant that you'd have had the battalion also leadership, battalion commanders, battalion staff, and if their men were not trained, it's in your face when those body bags get flown in to Bastion. When you see those helicopters come in, and you know they've gone to pick up. It just drops your stomach. Oh God, they're going to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, what I saw and what you brought out is that people only react when it's in your face and they personally suffer and know they are part of the butcher's bill or stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have meant that senior people would have done these tours and gone back into the EDF, and they would have done something about it a long time ago.
Yep.
Because what it's needed now is for the troop commander and company commander, because that's the highest level that really went out there. They had lieutenant colonels, but they were in the green zone and stuff. That doesn't count in my books.
Yep.
They have had to then filter over many years to get to the top, to maybe, hopefully, do something about it now. And we were quite lucky that that's happened, because for many years I felt the irony is, just like me, these guys were kept out of that side, which I wrote about in the articles.
Mm-hmm.
So I could not explain my deep joy and satisfaction when the barrier was broken.
It took some years.
It took 20
fighting.
years. It took 20 years. So yeah.
I think in terms of the company size, or actually the Baltic battalion should have been brigade. I think it could have been a better one, but I think it was done in terms of the right way. The only thing, but we just lost, was a little bit of time in terms of that we wouldn't have the deployed officers. We would have had more high-ranking ones, but I think we wouldn't been able to deploy more than a company anyways.
I go back to my ordinary thought process.
Mm-hmm.
My basic thought process is I don't ever vector into why we can't do it. I'm just going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Can do rather than cannot.
Yeah.
So whilst you have a valid point, I would see no reason why a conscript battalion could not deploy.
Yeah.
Just the same way I trained a conscript platoon to deploy.
I take back my words.
It's the same rationale, just an
agree.
expansion on the same thing.
Yeah.
And this would have forced, again,
Yes, I agree.
the conscript battalions to be up to level with their equipment and their training.
The country would have had an experience.
And anybody who says we can't send a conscript battalion, well, my answer to that is this: what do you think is the hardest task? The Corpriano battalion being sent to Afghanistan or Iraq and fighting in that environment against the Taliban and insurgents, or the Corpriano battalion fighting against a superpower with nuclear weapons, fast jet and tanks, and thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers. Because if if the conscript battalions ever get mobilised, that is their task.
Yep.
I rest my case, my lord.
I agree. I like it. I didn't think of that at all. So yeah, if you use conscripts, that would have been a big step for the country.
That's why I hate the word conscript, because it was always used as a connotation to say poorly trained soldier.
Mm.
And I've actually had an inspector of infantry who said to me, "Oh, they're only when I said to him how we must improve conscript training, his answer to me was, "Oh, they're only conscripts." And he said, "We have the scout battalion," and I just thought, "Dear God." This guy was a former political officer, actually.
Mm.
So I said, "What?" So let's just imagine that the scout battalion is the best battalion in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
They are. You know, okay, they are. So we're going to fight them with one battalion. Is that what you're saying? He just walked off. We are a conscript army.
Mm-hmm.
Thereby, should be conscript army centric. Everything is about the conscript army. Now, things have definitely improved.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I always felt it was about a concentration of effort on the so-called professionals, and they're only conscripts, which I thought was ridiculous. There's no such thing as soldiers are soldiers, end of story. So that's how I qualify it, to make sure that I don't also get into that mindset. It's well trained, and it's the same for the Kites Elite.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had the same argument about the Kites Elite. Oh, they're only Kites Elite. The Kites Elite are also there, which will form actually a large percentage of the main body of your fighting force. They are soldiers, and you have to train them as such. Now, if you have some groups who are older, the only thing that you're going to change maybe is their role is less. And but you have to define it, and you then train them to that standard based on their physical ability, such as, you've got guys my age, you could say, oh, they're going to be guarding key points. So do you need them to teach recce patrols and fighting patrols? Perhaps not. I definitely need to teach them how to use their weapons properly.
Mm-hmm.
I'll need to teach them marksmanship. I'll need to teach them some basic field craft so they get the mentality. I'll need to teach them definitely how to do duties of a sentry. But you see, that's why you must have a training system which is clearly defined with what their task is, what their standards are, and all the written lessons and trainers to teach it. Otherwise, it's just playing that game of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and just hoping on the day that it all works out.
Mm-hmm.
Which I
can only agree.
Which is something I definitely had to put up with years ago. Hopefully that's all changing now.
I think it is. I think
it is. I do think it is. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think it's very good.
Yeah, I do.
Is because
I do.
The environment and the people also. I think it's in general our educational system, our self-awareness, understanding of what we are as a human beings, that we have a possibility, that has changed a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed for the good, and I think also what has helped is having resident NATO battalions here has, because the Estonians have got a lot of, quite rightly, a lot of pride, self-pride. They don't want to look bad in front of somebody else. I know as a Marine, I would love to be working with the army. I want to show them how good I am.
Yeah.
I'm a Marine. So competition is a healthy thing.
Yep.
So having NATO forces here is a benchmark to aspire to, and even if you can, outperform.
I agree. It's definitely a couldn't wish for kind of better situation. I mean, what would be the there's no. It's the maximum.
Yeah.
What we have.
I think it, and even I have to admit, when I came back, and I was on my own. Whilst you did have some foreign visitors, there was absolutely nobody involved in infantry training, boots on the ground in Estonia. The SF who come, they visited, they were not allowed to teach. Because I complained to them. I said, stop coming here to give lectures on how to vote. They don't want to know that. They want to know how to kill X.
Mm-hmm.
And until you can do that, politely I said, you can. And they did.
And that was the right
they
thing.
Did, actually, I was quite surprised by that. They did, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was me on my own, trying to get on with it. And now look at it. I didn't imagine that then. It never crossed my mind, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's an impossible dream.
Yeah, it is. I couldn't have imagined it. I couldn't. So I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And conversely, if I ever do meet some Brits, that's why I try not to say anything, because if I even mention about when I came here, they can't compute it. Do not compute.
Yeah.
They can't imagine it in a shape or form. I did mention it before, so I would get some, even some bad attitude, like I was crazy.
Which you are.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. And it's, I do get it. So yeah, I do understand that now.
Well, you are an outlier. There's no question about that.
Yeah, it's weird, but all's well that ends well. I've always recognised that life is strange, and you can't. When you look back on life, as I can more now, I'm.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite funny. This in less than 2.5 years, I'm 70, which I think's hilarious, And I've got a life to look back on, and even I couldn't have written or imagined this story if somebody had said to me many years ago, "This is what's going to happen to you." It'd have been like science fiction.
Yeah. It is crazy.
Yeah, so life is strange, and just go with the flow. And I think if you've got the best intentions, hopefully things will turn out okay.
Yeah, I like that saying. If you do the right things for the right reasons, you will win. Eventually.
And even if you don't, I still believe doing things for the right reason is how I'd like to die.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think you can ask for more of yourself. So that's why I'm totally at peace with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. I can look back on it now, and talk about it, and just smile actually.
And I'm glad that you can talk that back to my face.
Yeah, I'm happy. I said, the funny thing is, I was brought up never to talk about things, and certainly not to newspapers, and certainly not this. But after I wrote those articles for Soldier magazine, you could see I broke my cherry. well, my name's out there now, so why not go for it?
That's awesome. I like it.
Which leads me on to the point. Now, I did write you an email. I hope it's okay to say this on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Is it okay to get your permission, just to use the podcast as a reference point to extract some of what I've said to create a book, and from the book I will then get them, or the manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And I will then rewrite the manuscript, because at least it's a skeleton for me to work from.
Absolutely.
You know,
100%. Of course.
That'd be great. Yeah, and
Yeah.
because I've had people ask me to write a book for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And what the American colonel is here in the Yellow House. Do you know what I mean by the Yellow House?
No.
It's where they used to call. I'm sure they probably call it the same thing. It's the military liaison team, which is is a yellow building in the headquarters, and it's where the American headquarters of this team would be. So when I was dealing with the Iraq troop, I actually built up a really great relationship with the Americans for the obvious reason. They were very, very, very supportive and used to come out and visit and give me encouragement. And he would often say to me, you should write a book, and it should be about some advice you would give to SF teams dealing with teaching people in other countries and different circumstances.
I agree.
Which I think I sort of touched upon it today, which can never be taught on a course in UK for your own troops. Because the methodology that I used here, for example, you cannot use it. You can't use it there, and nor should you. But also, one of the things that I learnt here was that whilst I obviously prepare my lessons, I know what I have a vision of what I want at the end. Every time I met the audience, I would scan the audience, and I'd get a feeling from them. And maybe by starting by asking some questions, even having a little funny conversation, I'd start to find the method I'm going to use to teach this lesson. I think with the attitude and the tone, and I used to describe it as how I'm going to play the violin today. Will it be soft? Will it be sharp and vicious? Will it be a bit of both?
Yeah.
And I have to admit, it was quite exciting because I also knew that every time I go in front of an audience, I can fail. That was good because it kept me on my toes and never made me overconfident. To the point where you think, I don't need to practice, I don't need to rehearse, I'm just going to go and talk. No, make sure you approach every lesson as if it's your first. But you've got a depth of knowledge where you can now deal with it. Because, for example, one of the things I found was that this did happen more than once. I went to teach a subject and I couldn't teach it because that subject was based upon what I call the training ladder. And there's other subjects you needed to know before this. And I discovered that they didn't know that. And importantly, by this question and answer, and even some maybe demonstration, they would, in fact, normally it wasn't demonstration. I'd say, okay, let's go and do this before we go on to this. And they couldn't do it. And they would then admit they can't do it, and they would say, can you teach me that? Because if I had just said, you can't do that, I'm going to teach that, they go, we can do that. Or after you've taught them, because this did happen to me actually, I identified something they couldn't do, which was quite low level, let's say, quite basic. And after I taught it, they all became indignant and said, we could do that. Well, they can now, and I've lost my argument because they can do it because I've just taught them, and I can't. They haven't even proved to themselves they couldn't do it. So I realised, okay, I'll ask them if they can do this. They tell me they can, and I'd say, right, okay, let's just go and practice that. And it could be just one group, one small group, and I'd say, I'm gonna ask the remainder to look for mistakes or anything good. You can be the debriefers. So they'd go and do it, and this is quite good. This because the large group would then rip up the small group, so they were doing my job. And I'd say, right, do you think you need to be shown now the bits you've missed, etc., etc.? And they go, yeah, can you teach us? Those were some things that I found that over time was the best way to approach this without offending people, but really what it was understanding that the best way to do it is that they want to do what you want to do because they want to do it, and they even think it's their idea to do it. Yeah, again, you can't teach that. You just have to have a really deep knowledge to be prepared to teach a smorgasbord of so much that when it's in your face, you've just got to say, right, I'll teach that now.
I think I think to me, what's the difference is that you need to lead. You can't just be an instructor.
No, you've got to be a leader.
You have to lead the.
You've got to be a leader. You've got to be a leader.
That's what you need to be.
And in this case, you've got to be a very strong leader, very strong.
With a vision.
Yeah, with a vision. With a vision,
intent.
Yeah. With a vision.
And with intention of actually making things change, and you should be prepared of losing.
Yeah.
And then you have to play the long game, because in terms of being an instructor, you're kind of playing like you have a short-term task. Hey, you teach a skill. This is how it's done. Boom. That's it. That's done. But now, if you think about the long-term thing, it's a totally different game now. Maybe the first time you just build a relationship, and that will be that's what your mask behind the training.
Yeah, could
right?
be.
And so on and so forth. So you can play the wrong game, and there are different approaches. And yeah, we will go on and on this topic more as we now get to close to Estonia. But today we need to wrap it up. So again, it's been good to talk about the stuff with you again, and we will put down a new time, and we will continue.
Yeah, it's I enjoyed today. We didn't. Yet again, I think this is what happened because it's hard to grasp it until we watch it again.
Yeah.
But we've used the framework of my experiences to talk about some topics.
Yes.
And I hope that we don't bore the audience, because when we let's say put things into modules, like talk more about the Baltic Battalion project, which we've not done for a while, which obviously has influenced so much. We can also add some more meat to what we've talked about, because there's so much.
I totally understand. So let's wrap this one up, and we will figure out what we can do next.
Yeah, that's great. I've enjoyed talking to you today. It's a nice day. I'm now going to go to the gym.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
But I have to take my dogs for a walk first, then off to the gym.
All right. So okay. See you next time.
Okay, Revo. Until next time then.
Bye.
Bye.